I can give you a sit right here.
Okay, I just want to be just like I can give her this simple, you know what I mean?
Do you want to sit on the...
No, it's, I think it's fine to be on. Okay.
Water? How are you feeling? Are you good?
Yeah. I don't need any more coffee. I just need a little bit of wine.
I need my right here. Thanks for coming.
Hi everyone, my name is Evie Wilson. Welcome so much for coming tonight. We're really excited to have you. Oh, sorry. I am an associate producer here at the Pulitzer Center. For those of you who don't know about the Pulitzer Center, we're a nonprofit journalism organization dedicated to international reporting. So we give grants to journalists to work on long-form international reporting projects on underreported issues. And then we partner with a myriad of different publications. And then we work with educators to bring that journalism as well as those journalists into schools all over the country. So this is one of our programs, and we're really thrilled to have Paula with us tonight. Paula Bronstein is an award-winning documentary photographer. She's worked all over the globe, and tonight she's here to talk about her work in Afghanistan. She's been working in Afghanistan since 2001, and she's here actually in DC. We're really lucky to have her as a finalist for an IMFW award, the Anya Nedringhaus Courage in Photojournalism Award. So she's here to talk to you about her work in Afghanistan. She's got a book coming out in August, so I'm gonna pass it over to Paula Bronstein. We'll have questions after.
Hi everyone. Can everybody hear me okay back there? Yes? Good. It's really great to be here. Yeah, I'm honored to be a runner-up for the IWMF award, especially because it's Anya's award, and she was working in Afghanistan as long as I have, and she was killed in 2014. In fact, I was in the country when she was killed. So it's a very personal award for me. Very different from winning other kinds of photography awards, I should say. So tonight, I'm going to show you two projects. One I just finished on my last trip to Afghanistan is on the war wounded. They're both projects that speak about the invisible victims, the legacy of war in Afghanistan. When we talk about war widows, we are talking about the legacy of war. It's just, there's no other way to put it. There's an untold number of war widows now in Afghanistan. Some say 2 million, some say 2.5 million. In Kabul alone, 50 to 70,000. But these numbers are, I think they're just kind of rounded figures. I don't know what the real reality is. But for me, I having worked in the country for so long, I wanted to start looking at stories that, again, spoke to the legacy of the war. And Wall Street Journal asked me to work on this story in 2014. We started it. The story actually got shelved. It never ran in the paper in 2014. I then approached the Pulitzer Center. They gave me the grant to continue working on it in 2015. Eventually, it did run in the Wall Street Journal at the end of last year. It ran like November of 2015 with the help of the grant. The Wall Street Journal sometimes, they love the story idea, but for whatever many reasons, it had gotten shelved. So we brought it back to life, and you're looking at one of the photos. The second body of work I'm going to show you is on the war wounded. It's the most recent work I've done in Afghanistan. Most of these photos aren't published at this time. I was just, I just there in April. Sorry if I'm not holding the mic. I'm not used to holding the mic, so do tell me if you can't hear me. I'm going to just grab the mic for a second. So. Okay. So we started with this photo for obvious reasons. When you look at this woman's face, you see war. You see the horror of war. You see what it's done to her. And this is Nai's Bibi, and she says she's 68, but I think she's probably 75, and I don't even know if she knows how old she is. And she lost 7 members of her family. She's from Helmand province, which is the most war-torn part of Afghanistan. It's a huge province, a very volatile province. And in fact, it's where a friend of mine was just killed. David Gilkey, probably many of you know him. So it's kind of upsetting to me, because it just happened. But the fact is, here are these widows. What I'm trying to do with this story is just bring these invisible people, somehow get people to notice who they are and what their lives are like. This widow, I focused on her once I heard that she was in a situation of extreme poverty, living with 6 children, and her youngest daughter, who you see her holding, she was almost going to lose her because she was 3 months behind in the rent, and the landlord said, "Why don't you just give me your youngest?" This is not unusual in Afghanistan. Girls are often bought and sold, child brides. We all know about that. In this case, through social media, and I helped as much as I could with my translator. We got the word out that this was going on, and then people started helping out and giving her enough money to pay the rent, and then arresting the landlord as well. And here's another widow. I'm going to, I shot many widows, but tonight I'm just going to highlight some of them. This widow, I really, really wanted to spend time with her. The biggest problem for me doing this story was access. In Afghanistan, gaining access to women inside the home is not an easy task. And even if she wants me to document her life with her 2 handicapped children, it doesn't mean her brother-in-law will say yes, or another male member of the family. In this case, I was really pushing hard because this widow has 2 handicapped children. The 3-year-old that you see that she's hugging, was in the womb when her husband was killed, when a suicide blast went off at a shrine, a very famous shrine in Kabul. And so here she is now, uneducated, impoverished widow, barely 30, with 2 handicapped children. In many cases, I was just able only to shoot portraits and not really get in depth, which is what I always try to do. And again, many of us that are, doing what I do, it's what you just want to tell the story, and you want to get intimate photos, but in Afghanistan, access is always an issue. But for me, at least, this photo told a bit of her story. Here we have another widow who is surrounded by 11 children. 8 are hers, and the other 3 belong to her son, who was killed. So her husband was killed, her son was killed, both in the Afghan National Army. So now she's left, the widow, the matriarch. She is taking care of all these children. She lives in one of the sprawling IDP camps outside of Kabul. Again, you try to figure out, how do they get by? How do they have, how does it work? Well, we're going to move on to the next photo. This widow is not handicapped, but she pretends she's handicapped because she's a beggar. Many, many widows become beggars because they have no other way to make money. So if you're uneducated, you've gotten your one-time stipend from the government because your husband was killed as a soldier, and then you're on your own. Extended family might take care of you, but not very much. So very often what you see is women like her on the street. She told me that she has to act handicapped. If she doesn't, she won't get enough money. It's that simple. Here this widow is begging outside a bread shop just to, they give her the leftover food, the leftover bread they have, and then she takes it home. She does this instead of begging on the street. And here we have what is commonly seen, unfortunately, in Kabul, is a veiled woman, on a dusty road, crowded, just at rush hour, begging for whatever money she can get. And again, usually they take their kids, because whether they act like they're handicapped or they need to bring the kids. The kids, then people have more sympathy for them. There's a better chance of them getting more money when they're begging. In this case, they're all hiding from a dust storm that's coming into Kabul. This widow, she lives in the Hazara community. In Kabul, everything is sort of ethnically segregated. So she's Hazara. She lives in the tent that you can see behind her. I visited her a number of times. The only way she makes money is her children help her by weaving carpets. And quite often in Afghanistan, children are their small fingers are better at weaving the carpets. And it makes her enough money, but barely enough. Obviously, she's still living in this tent. Eventually, an NGO did help her. I was trying to help with outreach, and they helped her build a little house that's very similar to the one behind her, where another widow lives. It's just small little shacks, but at least it's a shelter. It's something. And here we have another scene inside the IDP camp, which is really just a sprawling, overcrowded, muddy, camp without running water, electricity. Many widows live there, because this is where most of the families from the southern provinces, the most volatile parts of the country, they come to these camps to escape the violence. Their houses have been blown up, some of their family members killed, in her case her husband's killed, and some other family members, and they have no place to go. They end up in these camps. Again, another shot from the camp. As you can see, it's pretty bad. But this is how they live. There isn't a lot of, this is not like, when you look at perhaps the refugee camps in Jordan or whatever that are housing the Syrian refugees. This is extremely, extremely basic, because the Afghan government is not really supporting them. So they depend on the UN, they depend on WFP, whoever can take pity on them. And this elderly widow that I photographed has dementia. When her husband died, she just lost all she does now is lie on the floor. I visit her a number of times, and every time I visit her, she was barely moving from that same exact spot in her house. And her son's a laborer, and he's the only one that takes care of her now. And we're just going to kind of run through a few more here so we don't run out of time. Just to get, you just get a picture of what very often I was doing portraiture again, because it was very hard for me to spend extended time to really get into the lives of these women because of access. Access is just, it's a tough road in Afghanistan. And this is one of the younger widows, and again, there's lots of hills surrounding Kabul. So I just wanted to show her more or less being alone, because she is very much alone. It's very hard for these widows to remarry. Usually it's a brother-in-law. They end up, it's more or less a forced marriage, if you like. But it's usually someone within the family, because they feel the children need to stay within the family. So they don't have a lot of choices. Very, very few choices for them. And here's a widow at the grave of her husband with her 2 children. We're kind of changing this. So this is the last photo for war widows. We can do Q&A at the end. we're moving on to the next subject of war wounded, and I just want to say some of the photos are rather graphic, and so I hope it doesn't bother any of you, but unfortunately the only way I can do the story, tell the story of the war wounded, first of all, I just want to just give you basically the reason why the war wounded, the first time I shot them, well, I would say it was 2009, and some of those photos are in my upcoming book on Afghanistan. At the end of last year, I saw the UNIMA report come out. The numbers were over 11,000. That means people killed or injured in Afghanistan. That's civilian casualties. When I saw those numbers, I just said, I have to do an update on this story. This is unbelievable. So with the help of the Pulitzer grant, I was able to go back and do an update on the war wounded. It's they're difficult pictures to look at. Unfortunately, there's no other way to tell the story. I work mostly through a hospital that only deals with the war wounded. It's an Italian-run hospital called Emergency, and they have 3 hospitals in Afghanistan. This poor man, so most of these victims are victims of mines, suicide bombings, or Taliban attacks of some sort. It could be an ambush, whatever. So we're talking gunfights, you know. This man is a farmer, and he came into the emergency room. He was just tending to his field. It's springtime. It's when farmers obviously tend to their fields. And a lot of the mines, if any of you have know much about mines, if there's a lot of rain, they will rise up. They'll come closer to the surface. Then if a farmer is tending to his field, what happens? He could just, you know, this is what happens. So one of the legacies of war in Afghanistan is unfortunately mines. It doesn't matter if we're talking about Laos, Cambodia, what have you, you know. Mines don't go away. They don't ever, you know. So I'm going to kind of run through these so we have enough time for the Q&A, but just so you get a little peek, a lot of these, as I said, most of them are not published yet because I just shot this. This story I just want to highlight very briefly because it was very upsetting to me. One of the reasons another reason I wanted to go back and look at the war wounded is that I feel like right now we're all numb to these stories about another suicide bombing, whether it's in Iraq or Afghanistan. It's another one, another one, another one. Unfortunately, these families are destroyed. You know, this is an aunt. She's holding a 3-year-old in the hospital. You know, and 2 members of the family were killed from this very, very small suicide bombing that would never make the headlines. Unfortunately, of course, here's the reality. You know, these people are the invisible victims. Any suicide bombing, it may be in the news for a day, maybe a day, and that's it. The next day, you know, the story's gone. Especially children. Children are, you know, it's very difficult for me with this adorable boy because he was from a very small village in Afghanistan, very remote, and his father was begging me. He said, "Please take him to the United States. I can't care for him now. He's a double amputee. I can't care for him now." And their house was bombed. So I was there when families visit because I really want to show the compassion of the families and what it's like for the families of these war wounded. She was 12 and had numerous problems. I obviously lost one of her arms. Pancreas, which is why she's holding the colostomy bag. They have to strengthen their chest because they've all had chest injuries, mostly bullet wounds. So the only way they can strengthen their lugs is by blowing into these bottles. But it's physical therapy, basic physical therapy that they have to do every day. This is one of the photos from my book. So it goes back to 2009. A lot of what I saw that really, really hit me hard is the children that have traumatic brain injuries. And this is from shrapnel, this is from bomb blasts, especially from bomb blasts. And this small boy was a paraplegic. The same for this man. It's the first time the child is seeing her father, who was a quadriplegic. Again, another quadriplegic. And you can see the bullet wound in his face. He took 4 or 5 bullets. Lucky to be alive, but unfortunately, this is how the rest of his life's going to be. So most of the nurses and doctors that work in this Italian-run hospital are Italian. And the patients are getting the best care they can possibly get in Afghanistan. It's an incredible place. And again, we see what happens to the handicapped, the war-wounded handicapped. They end up on the streets begging. This poor man, I really touched my heart. I met him at the ICRC Orthopedic Center, and then I found out his story. He was a truck driver for the U.S. Army and got shot in the neck. They claimed that they never got any compensation from the U.S. military. But this is his life every day now. His brother, his family is very, very supportive, thank God, and he has the best life he could have for someone with his handicap. His brother has to move him, shift him on the bed so he doesn't get bed sores. This is another photo from my book, so it's 2009. The next 2 photos, this one and this one, these are both victims from a bomb blast. They were both working for the largest television station in Kabul called Tolo TV. Very, very popular television station, very successful. The Taliban attacked. Taliban threatened the TV station and then attacked the employee van as they were on their way home after work. And it took me a long time to, I was reaching out to them for a long time, and finally they were both in India for treatment, and I was able to photograph them. I'm not going to go through every story because we'll run out of time for the Q&A. I did spend a fair amount of time at the ICRC Orthopedic Center because we have to tell the story of what happens next. To many of these victims that lose their limbs, they have to learn how to walk again. The ICRC is doing an amazing job at providing really high quality prosthetics and getting the handicapped to walk again. But you can see what it's like with his suspenders and the way he has to, when he's just, his injury is from mine, double amputee. And again, yeah, you see them begging on the street. So this is the last photo. Take any kind of questions and answers you have.
Yeah. Does anyone have any questions so far? Yeah, let me turn this on. Yeah.
Here, I'm gonna pass this back. Sorry. She'll pass that over.
I'd like to know how you get access and get them to pose. I'm also a photographer, and my hardest task is getting people to let me take their photos. You know, in natural, on the street kind of situations.
Well, in this country, in Afghanistan, it's very complex. It depends what you're trying to do, where you're trying to go. You know, am I working with, I'm working with the war widows. It's, as I mentioned, it's getting access inside the home. You have to get permission from men. This is the culture. It's a conservative Islamic culture. You have to work within the confines of the way things work in Afghanistan. So, especially with the widow with the 2 handicapped children, I so wanted to spend time with her. I mean, really, really get in depth into her life. But the door was shut. I got that one visit, sat and had tea, which is what you do there. I thought things really went well. I was looking forward to visiting with her again, and then my translator said, no. Brother-in-law said no. Changed his mind. Just like that. Just like that. Changed his mind. So, I'm just saying, for this subject, the war widows, it was very tough.
Any suggestions? That story of how you succeeded. I said, I know how tough it is, and I'm not even working with such.
But I think to me, depends what country you're working in. What are you trying to do? Working here, it's so different. You know what I'm saying? I just think, I'm just speaking from, these stories. With the war wounded story, I got great access from the hospital, so that wasn't a problem. The problem was for me to then follow a patient who's maybe from Wardak, Ghazni, or whatever Taliban entrenched area of the country. I can't go there. I can't go. What does that mean? That means when they leave the hospital, I can photograph at the orthopedic center where they get their prosthetics, where they're running, I can do all of that. But then if I really, again, want to photograph their life and what is it like in their village when they're with their new prosthetics, even a place like Wardak, it's not very far from Kabul. I would be afraid to spend any time there. I'm just saying, so to me it's very specific, depending on where you're trying to work, the culture, the confines of that country, the culture you're working within, and how you can, for me as a female photojournalist, how do I work in Afghanistan? I have very specific ways of working.
Well, I'm sure it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
I saw a question back there in the purple shirt. If you could come in a little bit, we'll pass this back to you.
Thank you very much for your work and for sharing it. It's really moving. One of the photos that I liked was the family it looked like you sort of juxtaposed them against a political billboard, or it looked like it was some sort of a billboard that was a political advertisement. And I was just curious if that was...
was it
the war widow with two kids?
Children?
Yeah.
That's a martyr poster. So her husband he was a soldier. He was a soldier and was killed after 3 months of deployment. And quite often they have a poster, to honor the person who died. And it's it's made for the funeral.
So that was her husband.
Yeah, it was her husband.
I think there was another image, Paula, that had in the background. Billboards.
Oh, do you mean the family begging out in the street?
Yeah.
Is that the one you're talking about?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. Because we can go back to that.
It's like a roundabout. Right there,
Yep. Yeah. That's a political billboard. I just thought the billboard to me was kind of bizarre against them all huddled together, with this pending sandstorm.
I liked it very much.
Oh, thank you. I think, normally they would have been like right out on the edge of the street begging, but they were just protecting themselves from the wind. But it's a very typical photograph in the sense that her whole all her kids are with her. And again, it brings more, it gets her more money begging on the street with her kids than by herself.
Thank you so much for the interesting and thoughtful presentation. What is your impression of the medical care that the patients are getting, the doctors, the nurses, the facilities, and so on?
At the emergency hospital?
Yeah, what are you visiting? Yeah.
The emergency hospital, because it's Italian run, everything is top class. I mean, everything is as if you were in a hospital in Italy. Everything is imported into Afghanistan, so they have all the best equipment. They have a huge funding within Italy for the emergency hospitals. They're working beyond Afghanistan. They're working in Africa and in other countries, but always working only with the war wounded. If someone comes in having had a heart attack or whatever, it's not their criteria. They won't take care of them. It has to be strictly war wounded. So, but the quality of care there I found absolutely incredible. I was so impressed with that hospital. I photographed in the Kabul hospital and the one in Helmand province. And so it's not the same at all as talking about a government-run Afghan hospital. This is a special place. It's like the MSF hospital, in Afghanistan. There were more than a few, and the one in Kunduz was bombed, but there's still one in Helmand province. So these hospitals are funded in different ways, and of course they get the best nurses and doctors coming from Italy. So the care is incredible.
Did you visit any rehab centers?
I visited the orthopedic, the picture you saw, we'll go to it. We should go to full screen. Anyways, this is one of the pictures from the ICR. It's run by the ICRC. And this orthopedic center has been in Afghanistan forever. And they do an amazing job. They have handicapped working on site. So, in fact, most of their employees are handicapped that are working there. So the handicapped are taking care of the handicapped. Incredible place.
Thank you so much for sharing your beautiful pictures. They're really amazing, captivating, and just sad. This is a really personal question, and forgive me for asking, but how can you do this and walk away and how do you survive what you view and leave?
I go back again. I don't leave completely. I go back again. I mean, it's a very, very good question. And all of us that do the kind of work that I do, we get very involved with our subjects, and it's difficult. It's very difficult, and with that one widow whose youngest daughter was going to possibly be sold to the landlord, I just said to the translator, this isn't going to happen. What can we do? But then again, you're working within the confines of, I have to look out for my own security, and then we have to figure out, okay. And then it ended up to be social media that helped her, and so, that way I wasn't going to be putting myself in danger, possibly that the landlord might come. You never know. You always in Afghanistan have to be thinking about this. But I go back, I've been working there since 9/11. So, well, after 9/11, I wasn't sent to New York. I was sent to Pakistan and then to Afghanistan. And then we went from Pakistan into Afghanistan in early December 2001. So I didn't see ground zero probably for about 6 months after. I just never went. But I mean, that was the beginning of me working in Afghanistan. And then I kept on returning And I was staffed with Getty Images, and they had me doing a variety of stories, both news and feature stories. So. But I mean, I've always tried to go back because I believe in what I do there, and I do believe it makes a difference.
You're gonna have a new book?
Coming out in August. Yeah. Very soon.
Hi, I'd like to add my gratitude to you for sharing these amazing pictures. They're some of the most, particularly the war wounded, are some of the most graphic pictures I've seen coming out of Afghanistan, and I want to get your sense of how optimistic you are that the most graphic among them are ever going to see the light of day in the American press.
Well, let me just put it to you this way. I think there's lots of subjects where, and someone might say, "Oh, too difficult to look at. We're not gonna. We can't tell this story." I mean, I heard this way back when I did a story on acid violence in Pakistan. They were portraits, but they were very graphic. These were acid violence victims, and I heard that then. Oh, no one will run it, and then. It got a lot of attention. And then, sometime later, a documentary was made about acid violence and this. In terms of this subject, the war wounded, I'm not sure there's any way of telling the story that's not hard to look at. I think, sure, it's easy to say, okay, this is the positive side. They're getting prosthetics. They're learning how to walk, even if they're a double amputee. But the reality is, when you, to me, when I finally was able to meet with her, she was afraid of having me photograph her because she was completely scarred, obviously, and she was one of the Tolo TV. She was a dubber at Tolo TV. She had one of the educated women. Had a great job, huge, wonderful future to look forward to. And now she told me. I asked her when I met with her, what, how do you feel now about living in Kabul? And she said, I just want to leave the country. I can't leave here anymore. So these people are broken. And, I feel like it is important to be in the emergency room, to get the immediacy, after a suicide bombing. And then we've seen these pictures. Obviously, you've seen them in Syria. You've seen them in Gaza. You've seen them, in any war zone. But you have to show the immediacy of what it's like for, it's horrific, and it's very difficult to see, but I feel it's part of the story. If someone doesn't want to publish that photo, they don't need to.
I didn't mean it as a criticism.
No, I know that.
Anyway, it
I know
was
that.
just whether you expected to be frustrated. Hopefully not.
No, I wouldn't be.
Okay.
No. I just think some subject matters are, tougher than others, So I would suspect with that mine victim where his face was completely blown off, that might be too difficult of a photo for to be published. But when you read the caption and you see this poor man who's just a farmer tending to his field in the springtime, that is actually more about the legacy of mines and what happens, just another part of war, but yeah, mines, yeah. But I spending so much time at this hospital, I couldn't believe how many mine victims there were. Incredible. It's such a huge problem in Afghanistan. Yes.
Thank you very much. That was a very emotional journey for us, especially we are working on Afghanistan as well, so we can very much relate to it. I have a question to ask. What is your feeling about the work that all these humanitarian agencies are doing in Afghanistan? Do you think that, like, these stories, perhaps if you can bring to them, talk to the NGOs who are working there, they can make a difference to their lives? That's the first question, and actually I have a second question. Is there any story out of these that you would like to follow up, maybe after a year or two, that what actually happened to their lives, and you would like to go back and see what happened?
This woman, I want to follow up with her because she had me crying when I was sitting next to her in her house. I mean, it took a long time to get access to her. She was in India for treatment, blah, blah, blah. But then when I realized how broken she was, I want to see, can she come back from this?
Can she get out?
Will she try to leave the country?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's not just up to her. It's up to her family, whether they're going to try to, leave Afghanistan. Yeah, there was people that I met that I, like her, that I really want to follow up on. Yeah. Because, especially for a woman in Afghanistan, it's very, very difficult. She was someone that had a really good job at Tolo TV and, a bright future and everything. And now she feels, okay, now what? What's my life going to be now? My face is scarred. Who will marry me? So I would like to follow up with her, yeah. So it's good you asked that question because her picture's right there.
And the first question, she asked about the humanitarian agencies and
I think some of them are doing a great job. The one picture of the Hazara war widow who lived in the tent, there's a couple of NGOs that are working very well with the war widows, trying to get, they have a program where they can get small houses built, and the widow herself is helping to build the house, and just small amounts of money, enough to get the supplies, give them the supplies, let them start to build, and then they hire some people, of course, to assist. But that's working. In some cases, I can't say it's a really kind of broad question in terms of which NGO we're talking about, I see the IDP camps especially because I went there a lot with the Widows Project. I just can't believe how appalling they are. They're squalid, they're overcrowded, you saw that it's just, this is outside of Kabul. This is outside, this is not in the middle of nowhere. And still, the Afghan government doesn't realize that, look at, where are these people going to go if their house was bombed and they're from Marja? Where are they going to go? They're going to end up, going to some camp. Where's the family going to go? They have to go somewhere. So at least create some kind of living situation that gives them some dignity. I don't see that at all.
Oh, we had two questions over here.
Yep.
Do you have a sense of how Afghanis, and in particular the people who are affected by the conflict and the war, think about their lives and their communities in the context of the fact that this has been a contested area for so long? And what do they sort of feel about the current conflict? Is it that this is just something that tends to happen in our region, or is just another cycle of conflict, or is there, do they feel any differently about recent conflicts in the context of the fact that there have been conflicts here for so long?
3 decades.
Yeah.
In Afghanistan, about 3, roughly speaking, 3 decades of war. And now this is America's longest war. Even though the troops pulled out, there's still some that remain. There is definitely a hopelessness. I was in Greece last year documenting the refugee crisis. There, 40% were Afghans. Something like 50%, obviously 50, 60, most were Syrians, but the second largest number were Afghans. In fact, my Dari is not very good, but I spoke more there than I do in Kabul. I was like talking to the families, where are you from, blah, 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 just trying to find out, why did they leave? Why do they feel such hopeless, and it's unemployment. It's a number of things. It's political instability, unemployment, endemic corruption that doesn't go away in the country. So they need stability. They need employment. It's key factors, Without that, they'll continue to flee, and I don't, if you had the choice of living in one of those IDP camps or maybe trying to flee to Europe, what would you do, So, and I've also seen, this year on this recent trip, I'm seeing more heroin addicts on the street. A lot more. they seem to be everywhere now. Why? It's unemployment. And the drug is very cheap. Very, very cheap, yeah. So.
And the production has increased.
And production is
in the
increased.
last 2 years.
Yes, yes, yes. This is a fact. Yes, you know.
Hi, thank you. I was curious about the amputees and the war wounded. You mentioned and showed several photos of the folks begging, but is there any other hope or alternative? Is there any small percentage that can get gainful employment, particularly those who have prosthetics later? Is there anything besides begging in their future? That's my question.
You're talking the widows. The widows or the wounded?
I was mostly referring to the amputee wounded.
Okay,
They're getting prosthetics. They're learning to walk again.
Yes.
Is this, I'm assuming, is going to make a difference between begging and not begging?
Absolutely, absolutely. The orthopedic center is employing these people, you know, and the quality of the prosthetics, I would say, is incredible. I mean, with the RCRCs, they've been doing this for many years. This is not recent. But I would say it definitely gets them, what the ICRC is doing is employing these people to set an example.
Yeah.
You know.
And are others picking that example up, or?
Absolutely, because the way prosthetics are now, you know, if someone's wearing, they're wearing sneakers, they're wearing pants, you can't tell immediately. No. So, I think, you know, I'd say in some cases, in Kabul, you see the beggars because it's an easy way to make a living. And they may be doing this on the street, and maybe at home they put on their prosthetics. You know? Yep. It's very possible, you know? It's just, what do you do, you know? And in a city that has very high unemployment, what do you do? I mean, that's the problem anyways, is the unemployment. Yeah.
Thank you, Paula. When the father asks you to take his child home with you to America, what do you say? And do other people have requests for either money or food or and how do you react?
When the father of that child, and I visited that child a number of times, I brought him toys and stuff because I just really took, you know, that little boy was so adorable. And I know the village they're from. It's really, really remote. So I knew when the father was saying it to me, it was very genuine. It wasn't like, you know, it was just like, what am I going to do now? This kind of, you know, here's my son. You know, what am I going to do now? But what do I say? Quite often it's just whatever comes from my heart. It's very spontaneous. I don't know, you know. And he's not speaking English, so I have to go through a translator. And I just, it's different every time, you know. But people often ask for money, you know, depending on their situation. That one widow who had the 6 children, you know, who's almost going to lose her youngest. You know, it's something that I have to deal with a lot. In, you know, I would never give money to my subject. I may buy the family rice or cooking oil or beans because I know those are the staples they need, and it helps. Even though it's something small, it helps. And I think it's important for me to do something when I can. But that's what I do. I mean, I think it's very hard to photograph people who are impoverished that have nothing, and then you walk away, and you know you have to do whatever you can do. That makes sense. That's appropriate. I should say appropriate because I don't think it works at all just to give money unless you're giving it to an NGO, and then it's going to go. You know. It doesn't matter whether I'm funding an NGO that deals with child brides or whatever. If it's a cause I believe in, of course. But
I see a question back there. Do you mind passing that to Ken?
So what do you say to the rest of us who are here in this country and can't buy rice? So what can we do? I mean, you mentioned NGOs maybe. Are there certain NGOs or are there other things that we can do?
I think it's about the NGOs that are working on the specific cause that you have an interest in. So if it's war widows and you're trying to say, okay, how can we give to an NGO that's working directly with these widows to help them build houses if they're homeless, to help put food on the table so they don't have to beg. The NGOs that are working well, and there was a question about them, are helping the widows learn handicrafts. So quite often they're learning how to embroider or do something they can do at home because they have children to take care of. So it has to be something, whether it's weaving carpet or embroidering, like I say, it's some way that they can make a little bit of money. And it works very, very well. And it's something the NGOs can do fairly successfully, I would say, you know, with a little bit of outreach, social workers going to the home, teaching them, you know, these handicrafts. So that's one brief solution as far as the widows go. And I met, you know, I met a number of widows that were able, you know, and some are doing other things, but they're very, very simple jobs and usually jobs that they can do at home.
So are you recommending local NGOs or are international?
Most of them are international. Most of them are international that work in Afghanistan. And it's just, when I was researching this project, I was actually obviously looking for the NGOs that just are really trying to help widows. In the winter time, what will happen is WFP or some of the UN agencies would be giving food aid to widows. There was more common practice years back and less now. Because a lot of NGOs, some NGOs have pulled out. There's less money, you know, being given towards Afghanistan in terms of NGOs. So, you know, it's kind of been on the, you know, sloping a bit downward in terms of aid money going in there. And I would say probably a lot of NGOs would tell you most of that's been shifted to Syrians, you know, trying to help the Syrians. But it's obviously a tremendous need in Afghanistan. And the widows are very vulnerable because a good deal of them are uneducated and illiterate. There's limited kind of jobs they can do. That's why the handicraft job works very well. So I was working with a Danish NGO. There's a Norwegian one also that was working there that was doing some good work with widows. So, you know. But I think a lot of the UN agencies have changed over the years in terms of the food aid they're giving. And again, it used to be just during the winter time. And now I'm seeing less of that too. So, kind of an indirect answer, but...
I think we have time for one more question, maybe two. Can we get the microphone up here?
Thank you. We're talking about the types of help we can do through NGOs in the country, but at the policy level, at the government level, what type of interventions from your experience working there for 15 years would have a more, let's say, successful impact in like sustaining or promoting the livelihoods of these people?
I think just what I was talking about in terms of the widows, definitely teaching them some way they can, how can they make money? They're illiterate, you know, most of the widows are illiterate. It's handicrafts, you know, doing simple embroidery, that's sold in the shops in Kabul and especially carpets. Because the widows will have 4 to 6 children, and the youngest ones can do very well weaving the carpets.